So I've got my group from last night.
Yeah, a few familiar faces. Yep.
Yeah. Morning all. Welcome, or I should say afternoon now for those who are joining after lunch.
Hi, Tim.
Good evening. Yeah.
Sure. Can anybody hear me today?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Got on, better, Tim. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow, lots of people from last night. Okay. Hi, folks. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to those of you that joined last night's session as well. I hope that you had plenty of rest. I should say last night's session. No, it was yesterday morning's session for you. It was last night for me. So thank you for joining today's session as well. This is all around project initiation. I've got my co-host Victor today, and Victor is going to feel free to jump in at any point in time throughout a very short presentation. Again, I've kept it nice and light so that we can encourage that question and answer session later on. I've got some case studies for you as well. If there are, of course, any particular questions that you want to ask throughout, please use the chat box. Both Victor and Dev are going to be monitoring the chat box, and the session will be recorded and will be made available by Dev as well. If you have any particular concerns or case studies of your own that you want to answer, then at the end of the session, we should have a good amount of time for that Q&A. So Tim, for you, if you got any specific questions, and James as well, if you got any specific questions. Hi, Tola. Once Tola has actually come in.
She's still joining.
Now, I think I have got my screen sharing thing sorted out. I had a bit of problem with doing that last night, so I'm kind of hoping that it's working. How about that?
Looks good.
Okay. Dev, I think we'll also be doing a brief period at the end of the session as a wave for everybody with videos on, and he'll come on and actually ask people to put their videos on at that point in time. So project initiation, it is obviously hugely important to the success of our projects. Getting this right is probably fundamentally the singular most important thing for project success. However, we quite often see that it is either poorly done, in some instances, not done at all. And we find that we have a lot of problems that are created as a result of inadequate project initiation. There is also a lot of confusion around what project initiation actually does mean. And it is different as well, depending on what methodology you're used to working in. So both myself and Victor, I work in Prince 2 as well. I'm not a PMP person. However, I do know the PMP book of knowledge, so your PMBOK, and I have worked in those environments as well as the Agile environments. And I'm also a program manager in both the Agile program management space as well as managing successful programs. Both myself and Victor, we are trainers in various different methodologies. So we exercise best practice. And of course, best practice is what we're all about, because I also occasionally come in and do auditing. And of course, if you've been on one of my training courses at all in the past, or indeed in the future, and you've got me as an auditor, you don't want to be getting it wrong. Okay. What I've done first of all is I've just set up some common ground, some terminology in the phases themselves. So we have at the top there the PMP methodology, and typically they have just the project charter. Now the project charter is done pre-project, normally by the sponsor themselves in the PMP space. However, it is also common for that to be handed to the project manager as part of their project initiation. And that project initiation literally confirms what is done pre-project. So it confirms the definition, the scope of the project, what it's actually about, and it also incorporates the business case. Project initiation itself in the PMP space looks at expanding, so gathering requirements and expanding on the project charter. You also then have the planning phase for the work to be done, followed by execution. In the Prince2 world, pre-project starts off with a project mandate in some form. Now that project mandate can be quite detailed, or in fact it could be quite light. That is expanded in the startup phase into a project brief, which is further expanded in initiation into what we call a project initiation documentation, which most people might be familiar with in their organization. It's quite simply called a PID. You quite often see the word PID in your organizations a lot. It would also be the equivalent of a project definition document. Agile PM, which is the DSDM, just one of those frameworks. So this has a terms of reference at the very start, pre-project, and the terms of reference does in fact have a very specific purpose. That purpose is whether or not the project should even go into feasibility based on what the business needs and when the business needs it, for those of you who attended last night, and also the prioritization of the project within the wider portfolio. So it means that projects only get started when you are actually able to start them. And the same is true of your project mandate and its uses and why it should be there. The feasibility assessment in Agile PM, that is the equivalent of a project brief. It is a collection of different documents, and the key focus that we'll be looking at will be what we call the management approach definition. Well, the acronym for that one is MAD, because it's the project manager's document. In their foundations phase, we actually have expanded on the documentation created in feasibility to just enough level of detail in order for a decision to be made of whether or not we should actually go any further. And that is actually the real point of the charter, project initiation for PMP, our project initiation documentation in Prince2, as well as our Agile PM. Should we actually start the work itself? And it's a common misunderstanding in organizations because quite often we see the start of the project literally at the point that is handed over to the project manager. Now, that's not actually the project manager's fault. It's actually just quite simply the nature of organizations in, well, reality, how we've been exercised in terms of our mental bandwidth. We have been pushed into a direction where instead of doing the initiation work for that decision to be made, the decision has been made too soon to carry on for something that might actually not be feasible at all to carry out.
Kerrie, could I just
Yep, go for it.
chip in there? And of course, meant to be obvious, but how well we do it in different environments is another matter. Meant to be obvious, but what has to survive scrutiny as we move gradually from left to right is the business case. The business case has got to develop more credibility. There should be increased evidence of viability of the project as we move through. So just in case, we're wondering, oh, we haven't mentioned the business case. That underpins everything Kerrie has said. The business case has got to survive scrutiny in all of this. And we should have a much more solid, more convincing business case at the end of initiation, at the end of the third column.
Yes, there
Kerrie.
should be that business case. PMP is the one that is slightly different there. So PMP, the business case is actually finalised with that project charter. So it's actually a subset of the project charter. As part of your Prince2 environment, the business case is developed in an outline in the startup, and then in initiation it is, I won't say the word finalised, I want to say the word finalised, but it's not actually finalised. It has enough detail for a business decision to be made on whether the project is viable, whether it is achievable, and whether it is desirable. And we continually come back to the business case throughout the Prince2 environment to check that ongoing viability. If the business case is no longer aligned to the organisation's needs, or it's no longer viable, the benefits are no longer achievable, then the project should in fact be stopped. likewise in Agile PM. Now, the business case here is not actually the focal point. We actually have a prioritized requirements list based on the outcomes and also our delivery plan. We confirm, however, from the business case of the ongoing viability of the project. It's not actually a core component as a must do in the Agile environment. However, your prioritized requirements list and your delivery plan is. That's not to say that a business case isn't done. It is equally important because it actually drives out the outcomes that are needed by the project on an increment by increment basis. Worthwhile probably mentioning as well, so Victor, just to make a note as a sideline there, business case. We'll see how many people might be interested in doing a business case session at the end of the session. Get everybody to put in the chat whether you'd be interested in that.
Yeah, we're planning one, but it'd be nice to hear. That's true. That's a good idea.
Could I just ask one thing on the previous slide? When you mentioned this feasibility study, were you saying that because of the nature of business, because of the way we work, decisions get made, so the feasibility assessment is essentially an academic thing? I mean, we should always do one, but it tends to not be done. Is that what you were saying?
So the feasibility assessment is actually a document or a series of documents with an executive summary. And it literally is just a snapshot in time of the state of development of some core products that we use, one of which is a business case, but it's not actually our primary focus. The primary focus for the feasibility assessment is, can we actually achieve the quality of the solution?
Okay.
Your project brief, funnily enough, does exactly the same thing in the Prince2 world. Yeah. Is the approach to the project the correct one? And also, as a result of that, can we actually meet the specified quality? So something that Prince2 actually has is what you call your project definition, which is a collection of information. So it's actually part of your project product description. It, in fact, defines the quality of the solution in terms of acceptance criteria. That information itself will then feed into your project initiation as part of your project overarching definition. And again, these two things, that project product description, it actually defines the scope of the project. Likewise, in your Agile PM side, the prioritized requirements list at a high level defines the scope of the project, and they do the exact same purpose. We seek to actually understand the overarching requirements and the direction that the project needs to take. Your foundation summary is literally just a summary for the end of that phase. Again, a snapshot in time in terms of the development, but specifically what we're looking for here in terms of initiation. That is to say, setting up the project for success, managing the project successfully. Our area of focus is our management approach definition. Your business case is important, but in your Agile PM space, it's not actually mandatory. Prince2, it's mandatory. Yeah, so it's just a little bit of differentiation there, Tim.
Okay, yep, thank you.
So why do we need project initiation? As I was just saying, pardon me, it sets the scene for the project. You know, it scopes out the project. It tells us about any constraints that we have. We should also be aware of any assumptions that we have made about the project. More specifically, it tells us what are the elements for managing the project. Now, I've got a couple more slides that is actually going to be looking specifically at those elements for management. Its primary focus for the auditors. You know, your auditors will pick up whatever your equivalent project initiation documentation is, and they will use that to audit your project. That could be internal auditors or indeed external auditors. Yeah, they want to see that you are in fact doing exactly what it is that you said that you would do in your initiation. it actually gives your key stakeholders confidence that you know what you are doing. It gives your sponsors or your project board confidence that the project is at least going to be well managed and that they can in fact actually stop the project if necessary. And of course, last but not least, it actually reduces the risk of project failure. Now, projects fail for a lot of reasons, but because this is a whole management space in terms of project initiation, it sets our project up for success because we are actually putting together all the procedures that we need, all those checkpoints that we need in order for us to manage the project effectively and therefore avoid as much as possible a project actually failing. Victor, do you have anything else that you want to add into there?
Nope, not on this one. Thanks.
So I hope that slide has actually nicely rounded up of why we actually need a project initiation at all. It's all about the success of our projects. And just bear in mind, your projects can actually take several left-hand turns and right-hand turns throughout its life cycle in order to achieve that end goal. You know, it's not going to necessarily go smooth sailing all the way through, but how we manage that stormy weather is of the utmost importance to the ultimate success.
Kerrie, quick question from me. Who's responsible for this at the end of the day? Is it something that the project manager should be putting together, or is it something that the project sponsor should be putting together, or indeed both?
It's actually the project manager's responsibility, and it is signed off by your sponsor or your project board. Yeah, so it's the contract, if you like, between the project manager and the project sponsor.
So what about if you join a project, because in a lot of cases projects are initiated and then they select a project manager? What happens in that instance?
Okay, so in the instance where your project manager is coming on board after some of this has been done, you absolutely must go back and validate the information that you've been given. Make sure it's correct. Yeah, I've seen a lot of it in the workforce where people have joined projects. So a project manager has left and a new one has come on board. And this is that primary focus document. Again, you should be able to come into any organization, pick up that project initiation documentation and know exactly how this project is going to be run. Yeah. You should be able to procedural document.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. No, you go, team. Go for it.
So I was just going to say, is the RACI formed at this part then? You know, the RACI thing that shows who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what. Is that part of this?
So RACI is something that is quite optional. A lot of organisations do actually use it as like a checklist, if you like. Yeah. It helps actually assure the quality of what is being done, and it helps people understand what their actual roles and responsibilities are at a glance.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just going to say that Deb's question is an interesting one because it flags why this is necessary. If we get it right during initiation, not only can we cope with situations where the PM leaves for whatever reason and we have to replace them, it also could be that it's your sponsor that gets a better opportunity, leaves the organization, right? Are you going to forego the strategic objectives of the project that the project is going to satisfy? No, you got to replace the sponsor. If we do get this right, when sponsors and other key people on our steering committees or project boards leave and they're replaced, as Kerrie said, they can go back and they can see exactly why we're doing it, what we're doing, and how we hope to achieve the objectives. Yeah.
I have a question here.
Go ahead.
Okay.
So, what is the role of a business analyst and a product manager? And how does the handover happen? What are the roles and responsibilities that they play in the initiation part? And how does the handover happen to a project manager?
Okay, that one's quite an interesting question. So a product manager typically comes more from Agile spaces. Your business analyst here actually is not really a role in Prince2 at all. It's not defined as a role in Prince 2, but they do actually have a significant part to play in terms of understanding what the actual requirements for the project are. So again, you're breaking down a overarching product into its component pieces. In your PMP, they actually do a requirements gathering exercise as part of that initiation to understand the full scope of the project itself. Prince 2 just happens to be slightly different. We do have roles, but in terms of a business analyst role, that would not be one of the Prince 2 environment. However, that said, so for everyone that attended last night, we actually were talking quite a lot about collaboration and requirements last night. And that is a key factor of doing this. This is not something that you can do in isolation. You know, a lot of the stuff that we do, we can't do in isolation. Planning itself, we can't do that in isolation. We need to plan with the people that are actually going to be doing the work. And likewise, when we're thinking about what that work is, yeah, it's the people that are going to be doing the work that really help us with those requirements, as well as the business side that tells us what those requirements are that they actually need in order to achieve those goals. It comes then really into how much detail do you want in initiation. Yeah? Planning is a significant part of project initiation, actually deciding whether it is actually viable. Yeah? Can we actually do this project at all? If we can't do the project, it's not viable. If we can't achieve the outcomes, yeah, it's not viable. And these are all questions that we certainly need to answer in project initiation. So Tola, for you, it's, you know, in terms of a product owner, the product owner is going to be representing the business needs, and the business analyst, their responsibility is to interpret those hierarching business needs into actual requirements and prioritize them.
Kerrie,
Okay.
can I ask a quick question, please?
Yep,
Which
James.
I think is a follow on. Do any of these particular approaches, the PMP, Prince 2 and Agile PM, lend themselves better to specific projects and business needs, or is this just three different ways of, you know, three different methodologies of project management?
These are actually three different of the very many methodologies out there. I chose these three quite simply because they are probably the ones that are used the most in the wider world in all organizations. You get a pretty good flavor of an organization that has dovetailed itself into the PMP way of working. You have organizations that are very much Prince 2, so local government, if you're in the UK, local government is very much aligned to Prince 2 and managing successful programs. So a project manager really needs to understand that particular methodology. Agile environments, although typically it's aligned to software and IT, again, it's, you know, it's making waves in local government, and a lot of organizations actually do use the Agile side of things as well. So it's not just IT, which is where it's come from. It's recognizing is that a lot of organizations use those Agile methodologies, and they're becoming more and more across the world. It's also worthwhile to recognize that your internal project management methodologies in organizations, most organizations will have some form of methodology that they use, and typically that will be based on one of those three. Yeah, quite often it's Prince 2, because again, Prince 2 is relatively old. In fact, actually it was developed in 1995 as well. So you see, these are all methodologies that have been around for quite some time. So most organizations will actually have tailored a methodology, an overarching methodology, into something that is usable for them. It's not a one size fits all either. Yeah, so part of what you do in initiation, part of that project approach, it's not just about whether we're going to go internally and build something internally, whether it's going to be a bespoke solution or whether it's going to be commercial off the shelf. something that we do actually need to consider is whether the methodology itself is suitable for that project, because it's not a one-size-fits-all. There might be certain constraints that says we can't actually use this particular methodology. And as part of what you do in initiation as well, if you are tailoring whatever your internal methodology is, if you're using Prince2, it is a principle. But if you're tailoring the methodology to suit the needs of the project and the organization, you must specify it in your project initiation as well. Because your auditors, if they don't actually see what it is that you have tailored, yeah, it will be a black mark against you because they won't understand it. They're not project managers.
So it's quite organic, I think, from what I'm understanding. So you could shift from a model of, say, PMP at the point of project initiation and move to a Prince2 methodology, potentially, given that the initiation is one step further down the line on that approach.
Yeah, you could realistically do that, yeah, if that is more appropriate. So again, working with your stakeholders, if your stakeholders really don't understand what is required of them is to work in a PMP environment, then they'll actually build up resistance. But if they're more comfortable with something like Prince2, you know, it would be more appropriate to use something that they're comfortable with. A lot of organizations, you might have your customers that work in a particular way, and that might be different from your own methodology. So you do actually need to understand what those different methodologies are out there. And recognizing, of course, is that not everybody on tonight's session comes from Prince2 or Agile PM. There is a mixed flavor. So it's actually worthwhile that everybody understands and at least has a common understanding of how these things fit together, where they actually fit into that picture.
Very helpful.
Kerrie, can I ask a quick question? You might have said this already and I might have missed it. PMP, you talk about Prince2 and Agile PM. Could you just give me a little bit more of an understanding of where PMP fits in? You know, you said Agile PM, software and IT, Prince2, local government, and PMP, where does that predominantly sit? If you know?
So PMP is, it was actually something that comes out of the United States. PMP from the Project Management Institute, it stands for Project Management Professional. The difference between PMP and Prince2 and Agile is actually quite simple. PMP focuses on project management. Yeah, so it's the skill set itself of project management. Agile PM and Prince2 are a methodology. Okay? That is how to run a project using a particular methodology, either Prince2 or Agile PM. Whereas the PMP space, that is literally your skill set as a project manager.
I think this is why we had to say yes when, and please forgive me, I just lost the name of the questionnaire before the last one, when he said you could use certain aspects of the PMI, PMP recommendations, and then for stronger project initiation, use the Prince2 elements. That's why it's good for us to be aware of all of them and then tailor as appropriate. Tailoring is so key to getting these things right, because this is an area where certification is rife. So a lot of people are certified, but do they have the tools to apply best practice properly to the project on ground? That's the key. It's that tailoring bit, which is why we have tried very much to make sure we're giving all flavors, because there are benefits to every one of them, right?
I think where I last worked, we would take an agile approach for, you know, say if a vendor was building an application for us, a new application, we would be quite agile working with them and with developers, and I think everybody was comfortable. But when we were working out processes for something like patching the server's estate every quarter, we would be a more waterfall approach, because there wasn't really a lot of variables. You know, okay, we're at the end of the quarter, what's going out of support, what's out of support. You've got the teams assembled within a sort of a methodology to patch them. Okay, we're doing these servers this quarter, guys, and leave those ones. Whereas, say, software development is more kind of more iterative somehow.
It is, just by the very nature it is. But, you know, so Agile itself was very much developed, and Agile PM actually came. It was a solution to rapid application development, or what we call RAD. But it has evolved over a significant period of time, given that DSDM has actually been around since 1994. It's just that it is not as well known as Scrum. And I have actually done a lot of work in a lot of different organizations around the Agile space, particularly around the DSDM space. And with one organization, we have actually, hypothetically, because it was the nature of the organization of what it was that they do, hypothetically, we've actually used it to build a submarine.
I'm amazed.
I've even had a group build the tree house, the cubby house for their daughters, using the Agile PM, so that DSDM approach. So it's not just software development. You can, in fact, use it for anything. Now, the question is, would you actually use it? Is it the right approach to be taking? Are there any constraints specifically that would prevent you from using that particular approach? So if you wanted to build your 50-story or 100-story high-rise using Agile PM, it's actually possible to do it.
Yeah, I guess I suppose the challenge is in my head, the Agile requires this empowerment of people.
So does Prince 2, and so does PMP. Yeah.
Okay.
These are the aspects that actually fall apart when we don't do our project initiation correctly. Yeah, everything that we need to do here, it is actually all around collaboration. It's all around empowerment. As a project manager, you're not there to actually dictate to the people on the ground that are going to be doing the work how to do their job. Yeah, that's management overkill. That's micromanagement. You are there actually to ensure that they have everything they need to do their job, resolve their issues as and when they are actually escalated to you, and ensure that the people are empowered and they feel comfortable coming to you and telling you that there is a problem, rather than finding out about it when it's way too late.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a query here, if I may, please.
Okay, Tuan.
Yeah. I mean, pardon me if my question is too novice, because I'm not into project management as my core expertise. I'm more into IT service management. So
Okay.
just thinking from change management perspective, IT service management, change management.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a large scale change, which you may be proposing in a release.
Yep.
Now that itself will be a project.
Absolutely.
So in change management, when you are assessing the change, when you are doing your risk and benefit analysis, impact analysis, cost benefit budgets.
Yep.
So who will play those parts, and I mean, who does it? Will it be the project initiation people, the BA and the project manager, the scrum master, and then they give those inputs to the change manager for their records, or how does it happen basically?
Okay, so Tuan, that one is a slightly aside one. I'll answer that one briefly, but I'm more than happy after this session to book some time with you to go over that particular scenario.
Sure.
So, this is where change and projects do actually need to work together. If you have a change that is a large change going into an organization, it needs to be run as a project, and your change manager is going to then be taking the lead to ensure that the deliveries are actually done in the right way. So the change manager is preparing the organization for the change of whatever is coming in, particularly when you're doing that kind of large scale changeover. They have to work together, and any change initiative that you do, it is in fact a project. Yeah, it's just quite simply that the viewpoint is looking at the outcomes itself. It still has to be run as a project. They're not just a whole load of tasks that need to be done. But that one, change management and project management, folks, that's a different topic altogether, which probably, Dev, if you want to put down that as a side note, then we can set up a session to look at that one as well at a future point.
Sure.
I don't
Okay.
want to divert the focus, but anyway, thanks for your answers. I'll catch up later on.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, project initiation. When we're looking at project initiation, there are different facets. I did try to put all this on one slide, but I decided it was completely unreadable, so I've put it onto 2 slides. Okay. So, what does it all mean? Project initiation covers setting up the management of your project for success, which means governance. Yeah, so that reporting structure, who do we need to report to in terms of our governance and when? Who is our sponsor? Do we have a steering committee? How is the project actually governed? Yeah. And under governance, you would have your structure, your organizational structure for the actual project itself. So who are the members of your team? Who are your project team itself? If you have an environment where you have those additional roles, so the business analyst role, the change manager role, that becomes part of your organizational structure. Okay. Stakeholder engagement. Who are the stakeholders and how do we communicate with them? Yeah, so if you're in a Prince 2 environment, then this is something that comes under your communication management approach. And if you're in an Agile PM environment, it is actually incorporated into your management approach definition. Yeah, if you're part of that PMP, it is a heading under that project charter, your stakeholder engagement. Obviously, stakeholders, they change. Victor?
Sorry, Kerrie, I'm going to own up. My multitasking let me down there. I just typed a method. Go for it again. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
Okay. So we need to remember, of course, is that stakeholder engagement is ongoing from the outset. Yeah?
Sure.
It's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course, that's why we shouldn't come out of initiation or whatever the equivalent is without having a sensible communication plan or strategy. So, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, email is not the best way to communicate with your stakeholders in terms of stakeholder engagement. Face-to-face is always best. Yeah.
And
the
just
stakeholder engagement. Yep,
sorry, Kerrie. I was just going to say, and just to remind people that we have run sessions before on stakeholder engagement and communications, and I've just posted on chat the link to where we've hosted these videos. So if you're interested, please have a look at those.
Thanks, Dev. That's great. Yeah.
Now, risk and review management is always an interesting one because something that quite often gets missed is the actual procedural side. We assume that everybody knows how to do risk and issue management. The reality is there's not all that many people, particularly those that are doing the work, actually know how. Yeah? They know what a risk is and they can put it into the risk register. And this is actually where our projects do start to fall over from the outset. Poor risk management. Yeah? So part of your initiation is to set up that risk management procedure. Now, if your organization already has a risk management strategy, which is a procedural document on how to manage risks, yeah, we would quite simply dovetail into that organizational level risk management strategy. Yeah, we might need to tweak it a bit for our project, but you should always refer back to the organizational norm. The idea here is not to be reinventing the wheel each time. Yeah? If you've got it in play, use it.
Kerrie,
Yep.
just to say again, we've been talking about sessions we had in the past, and as Dev said, there's a link to them.
Yep.
But sorry to plug this one. Sorry for the shameless advertising, but we have a risk and issue session next week. And we can guarantee you will hear something new. You will hear something you haven't thought of before. That's a promise. Take us up on that challenge. Okay, thanks, Kerrie.
Okay, seeing as Victor and Dev have actually plugged those 2 sessions, I'm going to plug. We've got the governance and project controls next week as well. Yeah, so I'm hosting that one. Please do come and join the project governance and controls, which actually very specifically looks at those reporting side of things. Okay, so the reports.
So
Can I
would
just say
this
just
be a
something
good
from
moment,
my experience?
Kerrie, of sorry, Deborah, just a minute. Would this be a good moment, Kerrie, of just getting everyone to give us a wave? So if you don't mind sort of switching off your share for the moment, Kerrie, and then we just get everyone on, turn on the videos. And
I found it. Dev asked me to do far too many things here.
It's just the one thing, Kerrie, just unshare.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
If you look at your share screen, you can stop your share.
All
He's
right,
done it already.
I've paused it. I saw the bit that says pause share. I did that one. Okay. You want your wave now, do you, Dev?
Well, if you're still sharing, it looks like. That's it. Great. So if everyone turns on their screens and give us a wave, please. Thank you. Would help if I did it too, wouldn't it?
It would indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Sorry, Kerrie. Slight break. Carry on now.
Okay.
I think Deborah had a question, didn't she? I think Deborah had a question.
So Deborah,
It was
did have
just
a question.
a comment really on that slide. So I worked in IT service design and transition and acceptance. So I govern a project. So I would say all of those stakeholders, all of those functions there need to be stakeholders in your project. And at the very least, at the beginning, you need to say, this is the project. Do you need to be involved right at the start? And then they'll tell you what sort of involvement they need to have. So there might not be the functions in the business, but there will be somebody that manages it somehow.
Yes, and then certainly in terms of internally to the project, particularly for risk and issue management, you will have a risk manager there in a risk function somewhere out in your wider organisation. Risk management and issue management here is very specific to your actual project. But what we don't want you to do is reinvent the wheel, reinvent the cycle. You know, it's actually quite painful developing a risk management strategy yourself. Yeah. So if you've already got it, use it. Yeah. And that includes that reporting and escalation as part of that. An issue management procedure, that could be dealing with change control as well. So in the Prince2 environment, as an example, you would have your change control strategy, which deals with both issues itself and requests for change. Okay, so there are two slightly different dynamics there. Depending on the nature of your organization, then you might have risk and issue management together and change control and configuration management together as well. Okay, so here we are really just setting up our controls in this respect. Risk and issue management procedure. You'll have a change control procedure. Most organizations do, particularly if you've got an IT space. Yeah? We're talking about how and when you actually need to go to a CAB or a TAB or a change control board, change advisory board, technical advisory board, what it is that you actually need to do when you go to that board, because that is that precursor for go live. Yeah, so again, it's part of that procedure. Configuration management is how we control the versions of the outputs. Yeah, so it's all important information. So if we need to roll back, yeah, we know where we're going to roll back to. Part of configuration management is obviously going to be that document control area, where we document things, how it is actually controlled. Do we have to go through a particular governance structure to get things signed off, as examples?
And Kerrie, of course, it helps us to track our products, know where they are, know what's going on, with the products and maintain their relationships. And as you said, of course, document management will be a key part of that. Yeah.
The plan itself. So it's the last few elements, the plan itself, so it's those high-level milestones, management stages, and the resources or the skills needed in order to implement those plans. So as we go through our project, depending on the nature and how it is set up, we will potentially have some sort of a gated system. If you're in Prince 2, you'll have management stages. If you're working in Agile environments, you'll have increments. Those increments actually do have a go, no go decision point at the end of it. And they have outcomes, what needs to be achieved. And it's actually those go, no go decision points that we're coming back and validating that business case. Is it still viable to carry on? Do we need to do anything else? Yeah. Those decision points quite often aligned to business drop dead dates, as an example, or you might be working in an organization that has those more traditional stage gates. Some organizations, particularly if you have some sort of involvement with the US financial services industry, as an example, you might need to follow the process for SOX compliance, so Sarbanes-Oxley. Yeah, in which case your management stages might be reflective of what you need to go through. Okay, so you're planning at a high level in initiation. It's not a detailed plan. It's not the nth degree of a plan. It is just quite simply a plan for the delivery. And we can keep it quite focused into the number of stages that we actually need to deploy it out. Yeah, that's not talking about the waterfall style. That is talking about very specifically what outcomes we want to achieve at given points in time. Okay? High-level milestones and management stages are not the same thing. Okay? High-level milestones can, in fact, and outside of a agile environment, do often get delivered late. Yeah, your high-level milestones might be payment milestones if you're working with third-party providers. Depending on the nature of the project, will actually depend on how much meaning those milestones really do have. Whereas management stages are very clear in terms of an actual deliverable, an actual value being given to the business. Okay, so it's just done at a high level. Those plans, as we get to the point in time that they need to be delivered, yeah, well, that's the point in time that we're going to then update those plans. But in terms of initiation, we just need to be able to say that it's achievable to actually do it. Yeah, can we really deliver it? And our high-level plan needs to have just the right level of detail for that decision to be made. Roles and responsibilities. So this is where you're asking about a RACI table. Okay, it will come from the RACI table will come from this. Part of what we actually need to do here is tell people what is your role for this project. And just bear in mind, all projects, the way that we work, we have roles. They are not job titles. Now, you can have a job title in your wider organization, but within the project itself, you might have a different role to play. Yes, project managers can come from a pool in the organization, a pool of project managers, potentially from a PMO. You might have a pool of technical architects, but in the project itself, your project manager might have a different role to play. They might be, in fact, a project support person, or indeed that technical architect might be the project manager. It is just a role in that particular project, and it can actually change per project. Okay? Roles and responsibilities also talk about our escalation pathway, our authorizing lines. So who do we actually need to give things to for authorization? Who do we actually need to escalate to when things go wrong? Yeah? When we're thinking about any early warning indicators, it's managed by exception. Who do we actually need to escalate it up to? It will define who is involved in the project and what their capacity is in that project. What is it that they're actually going to be doing? And it's very clear cut. That includes, of course, our governance. So the role of a sponsor, that is actually quite a clear role. The role of the project board, as an example, of which the sponsor is a member, is actually different. They are two slightly different things. So having those clearly defined roles and responsibilities helps everybody understand what is required of them in terms of that particular project. The business case will contain the expected benefits, the approach to the project. Depending on your organisation, it might also contain, as an example, the vision. And it contains an investment appraisal. And I've used investment appraisal very specifically because the actual cost of the project, they're just quite simply documented in the business case. The cost of the project itself comes from your project planning activities. So when we're thinking about what are the resources needed, it actually comes from the plan and we document it in the business case. Most organisations have quite typically some high-level risks that may have been identified. The investment appraisal actually looks at the cost of the project, the ongoing operations and maintenance costs, as well as where the funding is coming from. Okay, so it's a little bit broader in terms of investment appraisal. I don't actually expect, when I'm working with the organisations, I don't expect the project manager to actually be able to complete a business case. However, your business analyst people, it is something that they are in fact very good at, and it's typically one of their skill sets. And last but not least here is quality, how the quality of the outputs will be assured, as well as the quality of the project. So that in terms of process is the second one there, the quality of the project in terms of process. So it means actually walking the talk. If you say that you're going to do something, then do it in the exact way that you have said that you will do it. And this is where your auditors come in. Quality in terms of the outputs, that is talking about whether something is of a quality standard. So how are we going to determine that acceptance criteria have been met? The kind of things you'll be looking for is, of course, how your test cases are going to be run, what tools need to be used. Okay? All right there? Victor, have you got anything that you want to add?
Yes. Can you hear me, Kerrie? Everyone?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Okay. This is what I think we tend to lose sometimes. I'm sure as you've gone through, we've all seen the importance of each of these elements. But what actually is easily missed, because we want to get it right, we're under pressure of time and budget, is these elements are actually the way in which we forestall project failure. If we look at all the major common reasons for project failure: poor articulation of requirements, poor understanding of what the customer wants, right? Poorly articulated business case, poor understanding of roles. We are, in taking these steps, actually beginning to mitigate the common causes of failure. So no matter how pressed we are for time, no matter how much pressure we got during the initiation period, we've got to try and get this right. It makes our lives a lot easier going forward.
It does indeed. And for anyone that's thinking, how long is all this going to take? Because, these are some of the problems that people do come across. Initiation can, in fact, take a very long time. The reality is, if you plan your work, and when I say plan the work, if you plan the initiation, typically you can actually get all this information just off the back of a couple of stakeholder engagement workshops. All of this information comes out very, very rapidly. So actually, we're making a bit of a rod for ourselves in terms of going into too much detail. These are things, a couple of days worth of workshops that you can actually get to very, very quickly and easily.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed over the years in IT, right? Because I'm old now. I've worked in IT a lot of times. Sometimes you get someone who's become a manager and they're from a technical background. So they might have been a database administrator for years or a developer for years, whatever. Time passes and they get a management job. But what doesn't always then happen, they don't seem to think that there's a paradigm shift in thinking, and they're supposed to be my manager, and they're logged onto the database all day. And I think, if you're my manager, why are you doing any work at all? Isn't your job to make sure everybody's working? And that is what I would want you to do, but not look up from your database and go, oh, hang on, Tim, I'm busy at the moment. I'm creating another index. And I think, just because you can do it doesn't mean you need to. And it's the hardest thing in all of these things. It's the paradigm shift of thinking, isn't it?
Yes, and just bear in mind as well that in these different methodologies, and you're talking about roles and responsibilities, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have more than one role. And it's actually quite typical in an Agile environment. It's becoming more and more typical in the Prince 2 environment. Yeah? If you have got the right skill set to be doing the work, you've actually then undertaking two different roles. You could be the project manager, but you could also be the person responsible for doing the work as well. It's actually a different role with a different set of responsibilities. Provided there is no conflict of interest, yeah, it's not a problem.
There's another question that Mohammed raised.
Yep.
Mohammed, I don't know whether you want to ask the question yourself, or would you like me to read it out? Okay, I'll start reading out because Mohammed hasn't responded. Essentially his question is that you may set up all of these roles and responsibilities in a charter, but what happens when managers across the business are interfering with the roles and responsibilities you've defined?
That one's always an interesting one, Mohammed. This is where those pathways of escalation come into play. And if you're engaging with your stakeholders correctly, which means externally, those line managers, yeah, they need to understand what those demarcation points are. And as project managers, if we are having that particular issue, and believe me, it happens extremely frequently, you can either do one of two things. If you have the right rapport built up already with those line managers, you can address it directly with the line manager. Yeah. If you feel uncomfortable going directly to a line manager, then your direct pathway for escalating that particular issue is to your sponsor. Yeah. Your sponsor is somebody that is senior in your organization. They have clout. Yeah, so if people aren't actually following directly those roles and responsibilities, and you don't feel comfortable going directly to them, then you go through your sponsor. Part of signing off initiation means that people have actually agreed to following the rules as they have been defined. Yeah, so it's a project team. They will come from the rest of the organization, is cross-functional. Yeah, it's not necessarily all coming from a PMO. And in recognizing is that because they are cross-functional, they probably still have a day life as well and a day-to-day job. The two need to be kept separate for a reason. Yeah, because there will be conflict between your BAU role and your project role. Okay, this is why planning is very important. Making sure that we have the right resources. And part of that planning, when we're thinking about the resources themselves, we're actually engaging as stakeholders, those line managers from the business. And part of that engagement is getting those resources from them. If they're on board for the journey, you're actually breaking down barriers. The more you break down barriers, the less likely that problem is going to happen.
we have reminds me of a project manager that who's quite strong, and he would come on a project board that I sat on. He actually raised on the RAID that as a risk.
Yep, absolutely.
And then we did a temperature check every project board, and that kind of kept everybody honest, and that was a very effective way of doing it, actually.
Yeah, it's an extremely good way of doing it. Thank you, James.
Yeah, and it underlines why when we spoke about roles and responsibilities being clearly, stated and getting people to commit to them, we're not just talking about your business analysts or your product managers or your team managers. No, even the sponsor needs to have a role description which they actually understand and clearly agree that this is what I should be doing. So part of the problem is some sponsors just don't know exactly what they should be doing and how they should be backing up the project manager to help solve problems like this. So that's another challenge in certain environments. Yeah.
Hello, Victor. Can you hear me?
Hi, Tola.
Oh, hello. Yes. One thing I found is that a lot of the problem arises if you as a project don't fund internal operations, if you don't calculate that as part of your resourcing. So because what happens then is you are now asking the internal operations to do additional work and you're not funding them. So what I would advocate is always include internal operations costs within your project budgets. And that will sometimes allay the problem of, what's it called? When you allocate those roles and responsibilities, people not taking them up.
Yes. And so that is, again, it's slightly an aside there, but it's actually worthwhile mentioning. So under your plan where you have the resources needed, if you are using business as usual resources, it means they're not going to be there for their day job. It doesn't mean that you're going to give them a whole load of overtime that they're going to be doing on top of the day job, just in order to deliver the project. When we are looking at our plans, we need to understand the capacity of the resources and their availability. If they're not available, they're quite simply not available. You have two choices. You either backfill, so you take them out of business as usual and you then need to backfill their space. You can't leave BAU unattended. Or alternatively, you actually need to get in skilled resources from external sources, contractors. That could be either directly to your project, or it could be the backfill. It is a cost.
I think that dovetails nicely into the session yesterday, does it not?
It does.
The contingency 20 to 40%, essentially.
It does indeed, but again, here, this is part of the project approach. When we're thinking about what it is that we need to do and who needs to do it, part of that project approach is we might actually need to backfill resources into BAU. And BAU, particularly if it's a what I like to call the golden star person in BAU that we need on our project. The business is not going to be happy about letting them go. And they'll typically try to pull them back in to BAU work all the time. And that person themselves might be pulled in different directions. And so careful resource planning and resource management. If somebody is being pulled in different directions, they should be able to feel comfortable coming to you as a project manager and saying to you, I'm being pulled in different directions. And you need to be comfortable with dealing with it. Sometimes that means escalating to your sponsor. Sometimes it means dealing with it directly. So beware of those single points of failure in your organizations, the fountains of all knowledge. And those are the ones that we typically need for our projects. And the business doesn't want to let them go. Okay. Let's do some Q&A before we look at some case studies. So, Dev, what are some of the questions that have been coming up?
I think we've answered most of the questions, Kerrie. People are doing a great job on the chat anyway, answering them So last one that I could see that hadn't been answered was Mohammed, who just answered. If anyone has any other questions, please either speak up or just repost it on there.
Okay, so just before I start on case studies, has anybody got any questions, any additional questions?
I think you can carry on, Kerrie. Just as a time check, we are at 1:10 here in the UK, so you've got another 20 minutes.
Okay.
Actually, I do have a very, very quick question. I just want to check terminology, Kerrie. When you said stage gates earlier, is that what others might recognise as milestones? Is that just another way of saying that, or is that something else?
No, milestones and stage gates are actually different things. So stage gates are quite traditional. We used to have to go through a stage gate. For waterfall example, it was where you had to do requirements and they had to be signed off. That was a stage gate before you could actually move to doing your, pardon me, high level design. So you'd have those particular stages that you had to go through. The go, no go decision points is a stage gate. Some organizations have their stage gates aligned to financial committees as an example. So periodically you have to go through a stage gate, which is actually a financial committee, in order for your project to go any further. Because they're committing then the funding for that next stage. All a stage gate is really just for the business to actually confirm your project still has validity to them. It is still useful to them.
Thank you.
Okay. So each of these 3 case studies, they actually are problems, and they are problems because they have not been done in terms of the project initiation correctly. Case study number 1 was regarding specifically a question that was asked to me, funnily enough, through LinkedIn, not too many years ago from a PMP. Now, that person actually came to me because they were having difficulties with their sponsor. Their sponsor wasn't signing things off. Their sponsor wasn't giving them direction. And this was a project that had been going on for a reasonable amount of time by that point in time. It was a global project and it was IT related. The project manager actually came to me and asked for advice. And my response to them on how to deal with this particular problem was, could I have a look at their project charter? Now, the sponsor was doing exactly the right thing in this case because they didn't actually have a project charter at all. Yes, technically, PMP, it would be normally the sponsor's responsibility to develop at least an outline project charter. But as we saw earlier, we need to actually validate that information. And that becomes the project manager's responsibility. The sponsor can also hand the development of that project charter to the project manager to actually do it themselves. In this particular instance, there was no project charter, which meant there was nothing for the sponsor to sign off on. There was nothing for the sponsor to make a decision on. And therefore, the project should not have actually been doing anything at all. It's a common problem that we find in all organizations pretty much, where we're not doing things properly. The project just quite simply starts and takes off on its own. And there is nothing there to actually provide that governance. Things go wrong very, very rapidly. And because there are no controls in place in the first place, and there is no management structure for the project itself, it quite simply gets highlighted as a problem project. It may fail, but typically these kind of projects are the ones that say, please sir, can I have some more money, more time? You'll quite often see that there'll be a lot of risks. You'll also typically see a lot of change requests coming in because no one has actually understood from the outset what the project itself is about. They've not been engaged in the right way, and typically we haven't actually managed things in the right way. Case study number 2. So this one actually comes from a Prince 2 environment. Going back quite a few years, admittedly. So this was where we had a younger, fresher project manager with not a lot of experience, had been on their Prince 2 training course. And they had come back, and even back then, Prince 2 was a lot different from what it is now, obviously, but back then, he'd come back from his training course. Tailoring was part of Prince 2 20 years ago as well. Yeah. He'd come back from his training course, and he'd actually said for his next project that he has to do all this documentation. He forgot the rules of tailoring. And despite being told that, you know, for a simple project, you don't need to do it, he was insistent. So his next project just happened to be a very simple project. The effort involved in this particular small project was approximately 4 days worth of effort. But it took him nearly 6 months just to complete the paperwork, because he insisted from the outset that it had to be done, all of it. Yeah, so he wasn't tailoring to suit the needs of the organization. Even though he very quickly realized the error of his ways, yeah, part of what you do in initiation is what you say what you're going to do and you do it. Yeah, that's that audit trail. Because he said that he had to do it in a particular way, that meant that he had to do it in that particular way. No backsies on that one. And case study number 3. Now, no verification, and this was actually quite a big one. Now, so I already spoke a little bit about this one already. So this was a product go-to-market launch that was handed over. And at this particular point in time, when it was handed over to me, all I had was literally the risk register. That was it. That was the sum total of the project documentation. In this particular instance, there was a significant error because it was quite clear just from the top 3 risks on a very extensive risk register that there was something inherently wrong. Not just the fact that the project manager had their name as the manager or the owner of each of the risks. Yeah? The actual risks themselves indicated that there was a problem in how that solution was in fact being developed. It was also the first time, so as part of the workshop of bringing people together to get this project back on its feet again. That was the first time that group had actually come together as a team. It was the first time they were made aware of each other. It was the first time that they'd actually seen the approach to the project itself. And as soon as they saw the approach to the project, the first thing that they said was, it can't be done that way. Yeah, that solution will not work on that platform. Yeah, so the initial problem itself was the architecture that had not actually been verified. The approach to the project itself was in fact incorrect. Anyone got any questions? I saw a few pop up there.
Kerrie, I just wanted to add that we wish we could say to budding project managers, these are quite rare, yeah?
We would like to say that they are quite rare, but yes, unfortunately, they're more common than you think they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a question about case study 1.
Yep.
Project charter. I'm about to start work as a contract PM on a big project which has been going for a while. The start date kept getting delayed for my start, so it's not had a designated project manager so far. I'm anticipating a variation on case study 1 because I don't think there is a very stringent governance, shall we say. I obviously have to be sensitive that I'm going in and that a lot of work has already been done. And I just wondered, how do you judge how far to go when you're validating sort of where a project's got to, and you basically work out that people don't really, this is what I think is likely, people don't really have a document or a set of documents that has told them what they need to know in terms of roles, responsibilities, etc.
The reality on that one, Rachel, and I'm sure Victor will back me up on this one, if it's not actually readily available, and people don't know about it, then you need to create it, because it will cause you problems further on down the track.
Yeah,
That's
I agree with that, but also I would encourage you to actually look at the nature of the project, the nature of the product, the environment, and decide on what methodology am I going to tailor here. What's best here? And once you decide on that, it's easier for you to have almost a checklist of things that, you know, have to be in place before we can move forward and, you know, have any chance of success. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And Rachel, if they're using something like Prince2 or Agile PM, there are principles. Yeah. And as a quick and easy way of doing that checklist is look at the principles and say, have I actually met these principles? As soon as you come across a principle that says no, yeah, then you know that you do actually need to be doing some backfill.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one, Kerrie, because sometimes people come on courses and they just think it's an academic exercise, right? But there is a key principle says learn from experience. Yes. Which means you shouldn't really move an inch forward until you've looked at similar projects, learn from similar work done before, and then incorporate that to save yourself time, energy, and sometimes money. So none of the principles are optional. So no, that's a good way. Yeah,
they're universal and they apply. They don't need tailoring. Principles are universal. They apply. Yeah. They have been tried and tested. Yeah, they work.
And I was just going to say, Kerrie, another great way of sort of trying to get people around your way of thinking is to incorporate the project sponsor. So Rachel, you're starting a new project, you really have to make that connection with your project sponsor, because if you can get him or her on your side to make sure you've got these elements in place, then they will do half the work for you.
Yeah.
And also another good way, Rachel, of you know, kicking off that particular project because you're coming in new, is you do have a meet and greet session that you can set up to get to know who your stakeholders are. So I would actually advocate having a relatively short workshop with the stakeholders and actually asking them, have they got any concerns about the project? You know, especially if this is something that has been on a back burner and stop-start over a period of time. Mm-hmm. They may have actually forgotten what the project itself is about. You know? So
yes, another thing I want to ask them is, do they understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing as part of the project?
Yes.
In the nicest.
Tola, have you got anything that you want to add to that? Tola?
Is Tola still with us?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, one of the key things I think you've already touched on it. What I normally do is do an audit when I go in as a new project manager. But one of the key things, like you said, is actually do that stakeholder workshop to get an understanding of actually what the concerns are, what the issues are, what's being done, which is good. I mean, I'm just remembering my last role as a program manager within the University of Edinburgh. Each of the projects I had SROs under me. Went to have a meeting with each of the SROs to sort of get an understanding of what was going well, what wasn't going well, what the issues were, and actually use that as your basis to move forward. So yeah, and actually once you actually then have recompiled what the issues are, I would actually have a new initiation meeting with them to make them aware of where we are, what we're going to be doing, who the stakeholders are, and if all the stakeholders aren't there, then it's also an opportunity sort of other people who will need to be involved also to be invited as well. Mm-hmm. So, okay.
Okay, thank you. That's all really useful.
Has anybody else got any questions that they'd like to ask?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, is that the end?
Yeah, so Dev, I just noticed on the chat that Meg's asked a question about the method for how the initiation outputs are change managed throughout the project. And I think you actually answered that, but it is a good question for everybody as well, is that everything that we actually create in that project initiation phase, it will be updated dynamically. Yeah, because these are all areas that we're constantly coming back and we are reviewing. So at the end of each and every single management stage, we'll be coming back and we'll be reviewing our stakeholders, making sure that we've got the stakeholders for that next stage actually on board. We'll be coming back and we'll be reviewing our change management side. So making sure that we know what we need to do to get that next element out into the organization for use. Yeah, so we're constantly coming back all the time. We'll be checking that our business case is really, really important actually, because of the information it contains. It contains the goals of the actual project itself. So those overriding goals for our projects, which means that whenever we're doing our risk and issue management, yeah, we're looking at our business case to see what is actually at risk. Yeah, that's how we get to the effective risk management, is keeping your eye on the prize. What is it that is actually at risk in terms of our business case and benefits of doing something? Yeah, so we're constantly updating our project initiation documentation to be reflective of a point in time. Our project team is not necessarily a static team. Yeah, the project level roles typically are quite static, unless of course you're working in an agile environment. Sometimes your project team can actually change, but your actual people doing the work throughout the life cycle of your project will in fact change on a regular basis. Now, once their bit of work is done, you don't need to keep them there any longer. Now you're freeing those resources up and giving them back to the organization for either business as usual or other pieces of work. Yeah, so we're constantly updating our organizational structure. Just as a word to note, if you happen to be in an Agile PM space, it is not a full-time role for the project manager. Yeah, and you can easily expect a project manager to work on a vast variety of projects, or indeed, you'll certainly have another role to play, typically a business analyst role. Yeah, you can actually become more than one role in that Agile PM space. So if there isn't any more questions, we can wrap up.
Great. Thank you very much, Kerrie, and thank you, Victor, for your contributions. Tola, yours as well. And indeed, all of you for participating in this really great session we've had. I hope you've all enjoyed it and you've learned a lot. I know I have, despite my many years of experience. So thank you again, Kerrie. I think it was a great, simple and straightforward presentation that we've all benefited from. The video will be made available in a few days.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Ciao.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, bye.